Good morning. I will be doing the Bible in 40 days for women. Day 1. Because God is a God of mercy, He allows the fallen to rise again. Genesis, the beginning. I will establish my covenant as an everlasting covenant between me and you and your descendants after you for the generation to come, to be your God and the God of your descendants after you. The whole land of Canaan, where you are now an alien, I will give as an everlasting possession to you and your descendants after you, and will be their God. Genesis 17:7-8. The world rolled out of the Creator's hand, and it was good. Unfortunately, sin soon hooked its claws into creation and left marks, especially on the crown of creation, Adam and Eve. They became proud, and instead of serving God, they wanted to be God's equals. Their descendants did not act any differently. They also disobeyed God, and hatred and son entered soon entered the world. Canaan, the firstborn son of Adam and Eve, could not contain his jealousy of his brother Abel, so he killed him. More and more people turned their backs on God and ended up in the claws of sin. Of course, this was very disappointing to God, and He sent a huge flood to remind the people of His power. Only Noah and his family survived. The merciful God then decided to start all over again, this time with a small group, Abraham and his family. God made a special agreement, a covenant with Abraham, and promised him his own land and a multitude of descendants. Abraham trusted God continuously, and he was not disappointed. God took great care of Abraham and his family. Unfortunately, sin was lurking just around the corner. Abraham's grandchild Jacob cheated his brother Esau out of his inheritance. Esau. And Esau was furious, and Jacob had to flee for his life. It took many years for God's grace to bring these two brothers together again. The 12 sons of Jacob, whose descendants would later become the 12 tribes of Israel, were also not angels. Typical negative human traits like jealousy, bitterness, and deceit were their constant companions. The situation exploded when Jacob singled out his own son Joseph as his favorite. His brother became so jealous that they sold Joseph to be Egyptian as a slave. But the magnitude of God's love and mercy extended the hate and sin that became part of human behavior. Although life in Egypt was difficult for Joseph, he soon discovered that God with him, even with a woman who had tried to seduce him, later falsely accused him of seduction, causing him to land in jail. When one door closes, God opened another. During this time, Joseph's family was struggling to survive in Israel because of the famine. To survive, they had to go begging for food in Egypt. They bowed down low before the governor of Egypt, not realizing that it was their brother, whom they had sold as a slave years before. They begged him for help, and suddenly, this is no longer the story of Jacob and his son, but rather a marvelous testimony of God's protection and a way to keep his people together. The governor, Joseph, embraced his brother with love. He not only fed them, But he also intended that they all stay with him. In this way, God's people were united at this time in Egypt. God's promise prevailed to be faithful. He is and remains the Lord of history. That ends day one.